Hello and welcome to another episode of Wheel of Horror, the podcast where two lifelong childhood best friends spin a wheel every day leading up to Halloween. It chooses the horror film and they discuss it. Today we're talking about 1993. Yep, 1993's Return to the Living Dead 3, which was directed by Brian Yuzna. I'm your co-host Alec.
And this is Joe.
And I'm going to say something right up top because I did listen to our last podcast. And you were like, you know what? Like, I don't know if the second one is better than this one. Maybe it's just like nostalgia or whatever. No. This one was better than the second one. For sure.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, fair enough. I have more appreciation for part two since we watched it. I don't know why, but I just kind of came to that movie on its own terms the last time we watched it. I mean, I won't go through our whole review, but yeah, I just kind of accepted it for what it was. But this one has always just held a special place in my heart. And funny enough, I saw this before I saw the second one.
Right. Yeah, I remember you saying that. Yeah, this one just it felt like it knew what it was, and you had said that in the last one. Definitely drops the comedy of the first two and really just leans right into horror. But I can't believe this was straight to VHS or whatever. Like, it's good. Like, I like this movie.
Before we jump into it, do you have any idea if you saw the R-rated cut or the unrated or NC-17 cut?
Ooh, it was on Freevee. There was a lot of boobies, so I'm guessing. I mean, it felt pretty NC-17, but I don't know what would have been the difference.
Tell you the truth, I'm not really sure. I don't think there is any scene that I could point to and say, oh, this is the NC-17 cut or the unrated cut. I think it's just little trims here and there of gore. I did see it, I believe, on Prime way back, and I was like, oh, this is a really neutered version of this movie because I grew up with it unrated, and the Blu-ray I have now is the unrated cut. But
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, if it is as gruesome as you think it was, hopefully it was the same cut that I watched.
Well, I'm so desensitized to violence that even like the most graphic stuff, I'd be like, oh, okay, like yeah, that was pretty bad. I don't know, but I was kind of surprised by like how much breasts there was, like towards the end with like her whole like Hellraiser vibe going on. Like I was like, oh my God, her boobs are just out the whole time. So that was a little. I think you see the guy's dick too, right? You see Riverman's dick at the end.
Oh man, tell you the truth. Maybe you saw a third cut that I didn't see because I actually I don't remember that.
Yeah, there's like a pizza delivery, and then like he's like, "Let me." No. But maybe it's like the porno version. I don't know. So yeah, I don't know which version I saw, but it felt graphic. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure all versions of this movie feel pretty graphic. You mentioned direct to video, and yeah, this is, I would say, kind of the golden age of direct to video horror movies. I mean,
Yeah.
this is right around the time of Full Moon Entertainment and like the Puppet Master movies, and me just going to the video store and renting whatever had a really cool cover. And I mean, this is a really interesting time in horror movies. We've talked a lot about it, those pre-Scream years. And this was kind of an event movie, or at least as much of an event as a direct-to-video horror movie can be. It was Fangoria cover story. I still have my issue. I actually read it in preparation for this episode.
Yes.
And I just remember being super excited about it. Even though I hadn't seen part two, I don't know why that one I skipped. I had seen the first one. But yeah, I remember this is a very vivid memory of being, it must have come out in the summer because I was in the outfield at Little League practice.
Oh wow.
I was 11, so in 93. So just thinking, I just want to get to the video store and rent Return of the Living Dead 3.
Wait, but like I mean, there's a great chance it wasn't going to be there.
Absolutely, because back then, they only got as many copies as they thought they would need. Like a
Right.
big new release, it would have a whole wall of movies.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
if I'm not mistaken with this, they had two copies. And I'm pretty sure they were there.
Okay, I guess I'm thinking like Jurassic Park would have been out then, so that would have been like the whole
Yes.
wall.
Yeah.
Schindler's List and Jurassic Park, and then like this has like two like in the
Yeah.
corner.
I didn't have to worry. But as soon as this movie starts, I see that Trimark logo and I'm just kind of flooded with memories. Like Trimark, they did the Leprechaun movies and the Warlock movies, or at least the Warlock sequels.
Mm.
So yeah, this is kind of a really special time for me.
Yeah, and this is a really, really stupid question. I'm sure the answer is yes, but they did have pay-per-view at this point too, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I remember the male lead in this movie the following year would star in the direct-to-video Pumpkinhead sequel. And I
Right.
remember, for whatever reason, I remember getting that on pay-per-view and not renting it.
Yeah, because I remember getting pay-per-view pretty young, but it was like back in the time where you couldn't pause it and it would just repeat for 24 hours.
Mm.
Like so it would have been a pretty big distinction to be like, this is a straight to video movie, not a straight to pay-per-view and video movie. Do you know or
Yeah, no, I'm not sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, yeah, because like back then the distribution would have been so different than today. So I don't know if there's
Mhm.
like, no, 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 this is exclusively on VHS.
Yeah, no, I remember that very distinctive VHS cover. It was like a red cover with Julie front and center, and it was very memorable.
Oh my God. Dude, okay, so her character I just gotta talk about. Like, first of all, gorgeous. She looks like Margot Robbie with red hair.
Love her. Oh, always have loved her.
Oh my God, I don't think I've ever seen her in anything before. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, she did go on to do some TV. Again, I was watching a little bit of this movie with my wife, and she recognized her from, I think, the OC.
Yeah, yeah, she was in that and Days of Our Lives. So
Okay.
if you like those kind of shows. But dude, like I'm looking at her and I'm just like, how is this not like a huge female Halloween costume? Like I just this character, I've never heard of her. I don't know anything about her. Now I'm like, oh my God, she's amazing. But this feels like a character that like a lot of horror women, like fans of, women horror fans would have been very into, but
Mhm.
I've never heard of her before.
Yeah, you'd think it would be kind of this staple costume at like horror cons, but then again, you have to be pretty committed to get away with this. If it
Yeah.
even was allowed, if you were going to be, really faithful to the costume. But
Oof.
I really think she's great in this movie.
Yes.
I think in general, like, her especially, but her and her boyfriend, I don't know the actor's name, but Kurt, like, I feel like their performances are better than they have any right being.
Absolutely. Like the acting in this one's better. Also, like the character development and the
Mhm.
interaction, but specifically between the father and the son. I like believed that. Like the
Mhm.
dad felt bad that he had to keep moving his son around and all this stuff. And like you could feel that he was like, my dad would have beat me for running out, but I'm not my dad. Like there was
Mhm.
just this like feeling inside of I don't know. I bought the character development and their relationships.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've always felt that way too. And this is a big shift from, the other Return of the Living Dead movies. And, I go back and forth on feeling like, is something missing, or do I really love this completely new direction that this movie takes? I feel both ways about it.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely drops the punk rock. I mean, aside from her costume, I guess, but it
Mhm.
also drops the comedy for the most part. I can't really think of anything that's funny in this.
Right. Yeah. I mean, unless you, find humor in the real over the top violence. I mean, I've heard this movie compared to like Reanimator, and
Mm,
Brian Usna actually directed Bride of a Reanimator, which I've never
right.
seen. And so I could see that. But interesting enough, I was reading that old Fangoria, and they talked about how, they wanted to get away from the comedy of the other movies, thinking that that just wouldn't be accepted in the 90s. They actually said something like that. And it is true. Like when you look back on some of the horror movies in the early 90s, there was kind of this grim attitude, especially before Scream.
Hmm. I wonder why, because you always hear that like after 9/11, you hear that like horror movies got real. But I mean, maybe
Mm,
the Gulf War, like Desert Storm, like actually did something. Because the 90s to me always feels like a time of just like stupidity, like Beavis and Butthead and
mhm.
just like Ren and Stimpy. Just like it was almost like too good to be true. Like, you know?
Yeah, I think, I mean, this could be this could be its own discussion,
Yeah, yeah.
but I think Silence of the Lambs had kind of an effect on horror
Mhm.
movies in the early 90s where you didn't even want it to be a horror movie. You wanted it to be a psychological thriller, you
Right.
know?
And Seven was coming
Yep.
out, I guess like 95, but
Mhm.
yeah. Yeah, that's true.
And also, I think, this movie takes some inspiration from things like Kurt and Courtney, the lead or the male lead of the movie, his name is Kurt, and I think it's after Kurt
Oh,
Cobain.
oh
And,
yeah.
I think they're kind of paying tribute to some tumultuous rock and roll relationships. Sid and Nancy, I think, is a little bit of an inspiration. The lead who plays Julie, she was actually in a play about Sid and Nancy. She played Nancy, and that kind
Ah.
of led to her getting this role. So I do think there are some musical flourishes in this movie. Like they want to run away to Seattle, and he's going to be
Yeah.
in a band in Seattle. Like I actually wish they kind of leaned into that further. I wish they kind of had more fun. There is this scene in the movie where you see their other friends and it's just so 90s, you know. I wish those other friends, were in the movie and they could have had fun with the 90s alternative types the way they had fun with the punks in the first movie.
Well, that's another big departure in this film from the other ones, not just like the, punk rocker and the attitude and everything, but the lack of characters. It
Mhm.
definitely focuses more on, these two, their relationship. They're like Romeo and Juliet. And I watched the
Mhm.
trailer and it does say like love never dies. Like that's
Yeah.
the tagline or whatever. But yeah, so like them being the focus, like their love or whatever, and Kurt's just blind, like, oh, maybe she'll be okay this time.
Mhm.
The other thing that I think is a big departure is there's not a lot of zombies in this one until like the last 30 minutes, maybe. I mean, there's a couple sprinkled through, but like, damn, dude, the zombies are not like the focus, I don't feel like in this one.
Yeah, it's not a party movie. I
No.
think, I said that in that review of the first movie. It's kind of the ultimate horror party movie,
Yeah.
but that isn't the case with this one, and that doesn't make it bad. I think this movie has a lot going for it, but it just is different. And going back to that little scene where we meet their friends, and did you think that the lead kid, Kurt, did you think he looked exactly like Edward Furlong when he pulls up on his scooter in the beginning?
For sure. He definitely had that same haircut, but for the first second, I thought it was Bobby Briggs from Twin Peaks again. I was like, wait, is he in this one too? Like I couldn't remember if he died. But yeah, no, definitely that exact Terminator haircut.
So I have, a very nice Blu-ray that was put out by Vestron a few years back, and there's a lot of great special features. And I thought I might be making this up because rewatching them for this review, I couldn't find proof of it. But I remember hearing that an early version of this movie took place at like a club or a venue, and I really would have just kind of loved to have seen that version. I think,
Hmm.
something like Green Room where they could have involved the other kids and there could have been these kind of grunge alternative types and
Yeah.
maybe a soundtrack. I kind of want to see the version of this movie that is a little more like the original movie. But again, I do like this kind of doomed romance direction they go in. And again, like it's really well acted. I don't want to oversell it. I don't think anyone is going to be winning Oscars from this movie,
Yeah, yeah.
but by 90s direct-to-video standards, and I've seen plenty, this is really well done.
I think you're definitely right though, of like it sprinkles in the little bit of the grunge things, by just the
Mhm.
characters and their hairstyles or whatever, and I guess a little bit of the music, but it never fully leans into it like the punk rock of the 85 movie does. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of Pet Cemetery 1 and 2, which the
Mhm.
first one came out in I think 88 or 89. And it definitely feels more like an 80s movie, but then the second one is like, oh, this is full blown 90s Nirvana, Pearl Jam, grunge. And
Yes.
so you can see that in the sequel, the jump into the early 90s. And this one, yeah, it just didn't fully commit, but it commits a little.
Yeah, and again, this is a low budget movie, and
Right, right.
having a soundtrack with bands, that would have cost a lot of money, and that's not where the money went. I read in that Fangoria, they had five different effects houses working on this movie, which is
Really?
understandable. Like, I mean, there are so many practical effects in this movie. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if that's where they wanted to spend their money, that's understandable.
I thought the special effects looked pretty good. I think one of the first zombies that comes out and then like his face melts off and he becomes a skeleton. Thought
Yeah.
that looked amazing, but the beginning part where his eye was still hanging on, I was like, oh man, the eye looks so fake. Just take the eye out. Everything else looks okay, but the eye is like ruining this. But yeah, the special effects are decent.
It's a real mixed bag. Like again, she looks amazing, and
Yeah.
she was done by Steve Johnson, who has done a million movies. I think he worked on Ghostbusters. Like he's done tons of amazing movies.
Yeah.
But then, like later, the Asian clerk that gets shot, like they're cutting between like half of his head is missing. So they're cutting between the actor and a dummy. And the fact
Yeah.
that they think they can do that, that there isn't much difference between the actor and the dummy is just hilarious. I mean, that's where the comedy comes in this movie. I think it's a bit unintentional,
Yeah.
but like I think, yeah, you could laugh at some of these effects moments, but some of them do work. I'll give it credit.
That moment specifically, I was like, wait, where is his brain now? Like, it's just, yeah, it definitely looked really fake. And it's funny because that actor, do you watch Curb Enthusiasm?
No.
He's the owner of the country club, so he's in a bunch of seasons, and I was like, oh my God, he's so young. So that was fun to see.
Oh, good for him.
Yeah, no, he's had longevity. Really quick though, not I don't want to derail too far from this, but I did look up Brian Usna a little bit, and I've seen a bunch of his stuff that he's produced more than he's directed. I have seen Society. I want to see The Dentist. I don't know what is wrong with me, but dude, one movie he produced that I saw when I was a kid that freaked the hell out of me, and I want to know if you saw it. It was from 1993. It's called Tick.
No, but I remember that being another cover story on Fangoria. Like this is such a strange era of horror movies where like they weren't even horror movies, they were like cult movies, you know what I mean? So it's just such a funny time period. But no, I remember like seeing pictures of it in Fangoria, but never never saw it.
Dude, I was a kid. I saw it on TV randomly and it ruined me. I remember it had Clint Howard in it, and I was like,
Mm,
what is wrong with that guy? And then my mom's like, that's like, Ron Howard's brother, whatever.
yep.
That movie scared the shit out of
He
me.
was constantly popping up in movies around this time too. The Ice Cream Man.
We have to do that, dude. I want to do that in Dentist so bad. But yes, I mean, the plot of this movie basically just kind of it's kind of like the other ones in the fact that like they unleash the chemical or whatever trioxine or whatever out of the tubs that the military's holding and then people get possessed. But the one thing that's really different is they're kind of doing what they did in Day of the Dead where they're like experimenting on zombies to use them for military purposes, which I don't think they've touched upon before, right?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. It seems like there's these two warring factions in the military. One, well, they both want to use them as like super soldiers, but one wants to build these like exoskeletons around them and that's how they're going to control them. And then the other one wants to essentially they have these darts that they shoot into them to tranquilize them. And supposedly that's supposed to be more humane. That the character Kurt's father says that.
Mm.
But yeah, both of them seem to be really bad ideas. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool that it carries over that like the military is going to use this for something, and now at this stage in the film series, we actually get to see them like testing it on zombies and turning them into like quote unquote super soldiers or whatever. It's kind that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I do feel like there is some continuity in this movie, I mean, in some ways, tonally, it does feel like its own thing. But, when you think about that first movie, like when they had that rotting female zombie on the slab and they're questioning her, like, why does she want to eat brains? And she says it makes the pain go away.
Yeah.
That's essentially what Julie will say later in this movie. So they did try to preserve some continuity.
Yeah, and the thing with Julie, because like throughout the film, it's like Julie is like hungry and she eats somebody, and then she like kind of becomes herself again. It's almost like a possession movie where she's evil and then she gets hit in the head and she's like, Kurt, I love you. But it's real because it's not a demon fucking with her. It's her really fighting this disease.
Yeah, and watching it, it's kind of an obvious metaphor for like being an addict, like and watching an interview with her on the Blu-ray, she essentially said that's how she played her. That's how she got into the role, thinking of it like, she was a heroin addict, but instead of heroin, she wanted to eat brains.
Ooh, I that went right over my head, and that is so clear as day now that you said it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the thing is with her specifically, like all the other zombies, it seems like when they get bit, they like turn into just immediate like monsters or whatever. But her, I think the reason that she's not like that is because she died in like a different way. She crashed in the motorcycle and smashed into that pole in a little comedic way. But when then she just gets the gas poured on her, so she like died of natural causes and then was brought back. And
Mhm.
I'm sure I'm screwing this up, but it seems like every other zombie we've ever met in the series has been bitten at least by another zombie. So like maybe she does have a little bit more self-control than other zombies would.
Yeah, I have no problem buying it. I'm trying to think if there's any contradictions
I know.
like Tom Matthews in the original movie, like they just get exposed to the toxin and then they slowly die, but they're themselves, I don't tell you the truth, it works fine for me.
I know. I was just watching, and like I haven't seen the first two since we've covered them, but I'm like, you know what? Because Tom Matthews and they were alive, then
Yeah.
breathed it
Yeah.
in, but what's her name was dead of natural, well, kind of
Yeah.
natural causes. So that's my crazy theory.
It's a little different in the first movie. Like once Tom Matthews actually dies, he it is almost like he becomes possessed. Like
Mm,
the moment he dies, like now he's able to like run around and foam at the mouth and go after his girlfriend. I don't know. Maybe the difference is Julie and Kurt. That was true love. That's the difference.
yeah, after 6 months. But hey, you never know. I do love the guns though that you were mentioning earlier. I think that's a really cool idea. It like shoots them and immediately knocks them out, and then I guess it
Yeah.
doesn't de-zombify them, but it makes them, I don't know, they can able to screw with them again.
Yeah, it just like freezes them or something.
Yeah.
It paralyzes them, and then they, I guess, stuff them in crates, and then they could use them again. That's the
Yeah.
plan, and that they would unleash them on the battlefield. I don't know. I don't know how good of a plan that is, but I mean, it's tough. You like the fact that these zombies are unkillable. It's I'm sure for the writer, it's not an easy thing to write.
No, because like in theory, when the woman shoots Riverman with the shotgun or whatever, his legs should start like, like limping towards her and try to kick her or whatever. So like, how do you control every part of their body if a body part's been kicked off? So yeah, you got to fill in some blanks.
Mhm.
But I do like that too. Like even the military, there's some like conflict there where it's like this woman comes in and she's trying to get control of the situation, but like the colonel who's currently in control has vested interest because his son's a part of it. Like it's not bad. Like there's real character development in this movie, like more so than like a modern blockbuster, I feel like.
I agree with you. I've always thought so.
Yeah, and here's the other thing. I'm just gonna say this too. This movie has, even though it's kind of some stereotypes, I mean, for sure, this movie has a lot of diversity and it has a female lead for the most part. I mean, Courtney, I think, is definitely the more interesting character, or not Courtney, whatever her name is, but she's a more interesting character. And also like, yeah, the military big bad guy is a woman at the end. So I'm like, this movie kind of like breaks barriers without even giving a shit and nobody cares and it just moves forward. But, the racial stereotypes are definitely they're there for sure.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I wish the movie took a different direction. Not because I don't like it, but once we get into the sewer, I feel like I would have wanted maybe a more interesting setting for this movie to take place. That's why when I hear about, oh, what if this took place at like a music venue or, there was some kind of club. They mentioned Club Kill earlier. I was like, oh, I wish we went to Club Kill instead of the sewer, but. Oh well, I'm still happy with what we get.
100%, dude. Like, and that, like, because the fact that they find them in the river, they're like, wait, like, it leads to the river, whatever. Like, well, let's go. It's like, come on. It would have been better if, yeah, they like dropped like a matchbook or something that had the club, and they're like, maybe they're going to this club or a flyer or something for tonight's event.
Yes. I have no idea why this gang wants to track them down for one thing, and how they track them down is pretty ridiculous. So,
Yeah, the how is insane, but the why, I guess, is because they bit their friend. So they're
right,
like,
yeah.
she bit her friend, but it's like, just go to the hospital.
Yeah, they're more than willing to let their friend just die in the back seat of their car. And they just want to get even with this girl.
Yeah, that's the thing. The motivation is like, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, the sewer is a little weak. I do like Riverman. I think it was an
Hmm.
interesting character, and it did remind me a lot of. Have you seen Barbarian, the newer
Yeah.
movie?
Yep.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of that, like the homeless guy taking care of them, and then him getting killed or whatever. Well, I guess he kind of gets killed. But that scene is fun though, where Julie comes out and you get to see her like Terminator moment, where it's just
Mhm.
like, steps out and fights everybody, and the guy's head gets ripped off. Like that was, I like that. That was
Yeah.
good.
Oh no, absolutely. I love her reveal. And I remember just kind of being excited as a kid when all the zombies start busting through the barriers. They put up the boards. You got to have a scene like that in a zombie movie. And I was such a big fan of Night of the Living Dead at the time. I loved that whole scene.
Yeah, yeah. And there was one part too where he's just like, the door's not gonna hold. And I'm like, that's not a door. And then all of a sudden they do rip a door down. I was like, oh, I was wrong. They do have a door, and it's all these planks up. Yeah, that was it was sick. And yeah, the one zombie with his head, he kind of looked like from Evil Dead 2. Like
Hmm.
like it looked good. It looked
Yeah.
good. And then I do love that like it could have ended kind of right there, like where he shoots Julie in the head or whatever, and then and even that moment felt real, where he's like really gripping with it for a moment, and then he steps aside and the dad shoots him. I was like, dude,
Hmm.
this movie is better, is so much better than it needs to be.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's sometimes the key with a lot of movies. Like when it's just like it doesn't need to be this good or I don't need this, but you're giving it to me anyway. You know, we're going to get a whole nother climax on top of this climax. I
Yeah.
mean, it's yeah, it's just like, man, this is great.
Yeah, and then yeah, it just opens up and they're back at the and like the dad and him have this like heart to heart moment where it's like, after your mother died, I got too much of my work and let's go on a trip, just you and me. And it's just like, oh my God, like reconciliation, like holy shit. And but then he does find out that oh, they're doing experiments, but not him, not his dad, the
Mhm.
new in charge colonel or whatever. And yeah, he finds Julie. She's all tied up. She's, all of her wounds are kind of healing or whatever, but she's kind of back to herself now. She's not
Mhm.
really a zombie anymore.
Yeah. And in lesser hands, and again, I don't really know Brian Usna all that well, but I will say in lesser hands, a lot of this could have come across really, really bad. Like really just kind of after school special or just kind of melodramatic or, teen romance. It could come across just very cheesy, but it doesn't.
No, it really, dude, even the ending. I mean, the very final ending. I mean, we'll get walk through a few things before that,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, just so much carnage. We find out that Riverman survives and he's a zombie, and they're like, shoving stuff into his brain to make him controllable and all this stuff. But yeah, they got to get better security, dude. Jesus Christ, they're like, yeah, we just got a couple scientists in here, and we're dealing with a unstoppable killing machine, but we don't have any guns or anything.
They do drop a line about that early in the movie, like at the beginning of the movie, about how, Washington didn't give us this, or,
Ah, okay. Well, I mean, hey, you know what? Honestly, if you don't have a budget for stuff like that, you say stuff like that. Give
yeah,
us this bullshit kind of like, okay, well, hey, they explained it.
they at least considered it.
Right. Okay. So there you go. Yeah. So Julie and they both break out and he gets bit
Mhm.
out of nowhere. And this is where we finally get the zombies in the movie. I mean, this is like the all the surviving ones break out. They're all at like different levels of being a zombie and stuff like that too. So they were like behaving pretty differently. They looked pretty different. So like
Mhm.
I like the
Yeah.
ending for sure.
Yeah. And then, our final moment, it kind of brings back memories of when James Cameron commits suicide in the first movie,
Oh
when
yeah.
he enters the incinerator, which, I think I mentioned in that review is always kind of a haunting moment, even in a relatively funny movie.
Mm.
And yeah, this ending hits pretty hard too.
Dude, yeah, it's just they realize that they're just gonna get either blown up at this facility or they're gonna turn to zombies and just become mindless or whatever. So they decide to light themselves on fire and they like kiss and the flames just engulf them, but
Mhm.
it's pretty. It's not gross or
Yeah.
annoying or like cheesy. It works.
Yeah, again, another scene that could have just been very cheesy, very melodramatic, very lame. But for my money, this works really well. And we didn't talk too much about Riverman, but like, I mean, he's a good character. This actor, I didn't realize. I did know him from something reading the Fangoria. For all you Steven Seagal fans listening, he was the villain in Marked for Death, which I remember from around this same time. But another character that is better than and more fleshed out than he needed to be, and
Yeah.
very wholesome too, actually.
His whole background with like New Orleans and the coin and passing it on and everything like that. I'm just like, why? This is so much backstory for a character. And then he like redeems himself too. Like he overcomes the zombie disease and opens the gate for them to escape. I'm like, dude, this
Mhm.
movie, like, why is it so good? Yeah, I mean, honestly, like if they could have done a little bit more with the grunge, maybe I don't know, there's really not much I need them to improve on. Maybe tie it into the first two a little bit more, but I don't even know if they need to do that.
Yeah, it's just something that, it has crossed my mind from time to time. I was thinking this time watching the movie, like when she is first revealed in all her glory, what if they played the "Do you want a pod?"
Yeah,
But then again, maybe that's too much. That's what they would do today because everything today has to call back to something else.
right.
Maybe it's cool that this just kind of does its own thing.
Yeah, I had heard that Brian Usna was pretty much given complete creative control of this. The only requirements was he had to mention and have the same gas, the trioxine or whatever, and
Hmm.
then also obviously zombies. And those are the only two requirements.
Right.
So he kind of took the liberty of being like, I'm going to make this more of like a monster love story, but
Mhm.
obviously have the requirements that I need to.
And it's so funny, he said something about how, what can you do with a zombie movie? Everything's already been done, and this was 1993. And when you think we've had, like 15 years of The Walking Dead and, Shaun of the Dead and how many remakes.
Yeah, that's so funny, dude. Yeah, I mean, I think 28 Days and Weeks Later was like great, for zombie movies. So it's funny that they thought they thought it was already dead.
Oh, absolutely.
Really quick before we wrap up here. So the sequels, they're just complete trash after this.
If I saw them, they have completely left my brain. Part of me is kind of curious. I would maybe like to check them out. I've been having like some nostalgic thoughts about the 2000s and 2000s direct-to-video horror, maybe because it's been like 20 years and
Yeah.
that was kind of the last gasp of the video store, which has, its own nostalgia tied to it. So, I am maybe a little curious to check those out, but I think I'd be fine if if it just ended here too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I think they came out. It's so funny. I looked them up. They both came out in 2005, like pretty much back to back. And it is kind of cool. They actually do, they don't carry on the story from this one at all, but four and five are continuations of each other. So,
Right.
like, it's not like four comes out and then like five is just completely random. So it's like, all right, maybe.
Yeah, I've watched actually some YouTube videos about them, and from what I understand, five is the better of the two, Rave to the Grave. And you know what? It'd be interesting. I don't know if they do that, but like if it kind of lampoons rave culture, like that should have been something that continued through this series. Like every movie kind of has fun with a different musical scene.
Mm,
I have no idea if the next two movies do that, but that could have been a fun little, theme.
yeah, it would have been interesting to hear like a Little John song in his. Well, Joe, thank you very much for introducing me to this movie, man. Because yeah, I honestly I like this one much more than the second one, and pretty close to the first one, honestly. So that's
Wow.
crazy. I know. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Okay. No, I'm really happy that you liked it. This was kind of a fun trip down memory lane.
Yeah, dude. No, very cool. All right, everybody. Well, thank you very much for listening into our discussion on Return of the Living Dead Part 3, and we'll see you tomorrow with something.